We've gotten used to scenes like this. Federal agents showing up in the streets, kitted out, no badge, no ID, wearing masks. They usually turn out to be either Border Patrol or Immigration and Customs Enforcement, known as ICE. Scenes like this seem to be everywhere lately. Often, they turn violent. This is not what we are used to police looking like. We think of cops as having to tell us who they are, who they're with, no matter what. That's one of the main things we know about them.
The FBI.
FBI.
I'm a police officer.
Which makes this sudden rise of unmarked vans and masked guys who won't identify themselves feel very strange.
Agents wearing masks.
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 Masking their identities.
Manhattan elected officials are going to unveil new legislation to stop ICE agents from wearing masks to conceal
Their identities.
Identify themselves.
To identify themselves.
Is that the issue here, that we're just upset about the masks?
Why? Why is this happening? Why does ICE wear masks? I spent a long time looking into this. I dug into court filings, budget documents, police reports. I tracked what the government is saying and what they're leaving out. I watched hundreds of citizen videos of ICE operations to map trends in what ICE agents are doing out there and how they are using masks to do it. And then I saw this video. That's from ICE killing a local mom in Minneapolis in her car. And it's made this question, why masks, even more important. Because this incident is just the tip of the iceberg. And I have come to really believe that if you want to understand why ICE acts like this, what their endgame is, the key to it all is to answer why they look like this. Question we want to end up with answering. What is ICE masking for? What is the end game? How do masks fit into it? But to get there, first we need to answer why Trump and the people around him want a mass police force, which is not something we've ever had before, which means digging into ICE's case for masks, their evidence, their data, what's true, what isn't, and what it leads out. But all of this makes more sense if you first take a step back and also see this as the culmination of a years-long tug of war between police and citizens over what happens when they come into contact. Let me show you what I mean. We've all seen videos like this. A police officer gets a little overheated with someone or tries to cut corners in a traffic stop. These go viral because we all understand that cops have a lot of power. And, they should. They need that to do their jobs. But it's also possible for them to abuse or misuse that power. And this is why we have rules for balancing between the rights of police on the one hand and citizens on the other. Police, for their part, have the power to use force. They can arrest you, and they can fine you. And we all basically accept this. Someone has to keep order, and they need those powers to do it. They're the arm of the law, right? So what protects you from one misusing his or her powers against you? Then they could do whatever they want, right? But citizens have protections too. For one, the law applies to cops. If Officer Steve smashes your face with a billy club because he doesn't like you, you can bring assault charges, criminal liability, or you can sue him for damages in civil court. Failing that, one of the biggest checks on police abuse has always been simply calling attention to it. Like, go back to that video of a Boston PD getting grabby with someone. Watch what happens when he realizes someone else is filming.
Good, you got it, good.
Back up. Back the up.
Notoriety can be a powerful deterrent. No one wants to risk losing their job or getting recognized at the grocery store for the wrong reason. But in recent years, citizens' protections against police have been gradually eroded away. Like, take the law saying it's a crime for a police officer to violate your rights. This goes back to the end of the Civil War, when Congress made police abuse a crime alongside abolishing slavery. That's how big of a deal this was. But they included a giant loophole. It's the federal government who enforces this law, which means that if it's the government who wanted that cop to violate your rights in the first place, there is no crime. More recently, the Supreme Court opened another big loophole. They said, from now on, even if a cop violates your rights, it's only illegal if other cops would consider what that cop did to be obviously excessive. This is a way cushier standard than the rest of us are judged by. It's like saying a used car salesman can only be convicted of lying if other used car salesmen would call him too dishonest.
Hi there. How you doing?
Ever since then, it's become so hard to convict a cop of breaking this law that district attorneys often won't even try. This was part of what led to the Black Lives Matter protests. Even when cops were caught on film killing someone without any apparent cause, nothing happened.
Ohio police officer Connor Grubb was acquitted of 6 charges stemming from the deadly shooting of a pregnant woman.
Which means, in that balance between cops and citizens, criminal liability isn't completely gone, but it might as well be. But that does leave civil liability, suing, which has been around since the founders. And the Supreme Court formalized this right in the 70s with a ruling that said if federal police agencies violate your rights without good reason, you can sue the individual officers. The idea being if Officer Steve smashes your car windows for fun or tases you because he doesn't like your politics, you can at least make him pay you damages, like as a deterrent. And this held for a long time, this balance. Until very recently, and you may have missed this, the Supreme Court blew it up.
A recent ruling by the Supreme Court is drawing criticism tonight as it effectively grants immunity in certain cases to federal law enforcement who violate the Constitution.
It started with a Border Patrol agent in Washington roughing up a local guy he suspected of wrongdoing. When the local guy filed a complaint, that agent got the DMV to review the guy's driver's license and the IRS to audit his taxes. So the guy sued. Rogue cop abusing his power to pursue a personal vendetta, right? Seems straightforward. But the Supreme Court took that case up and in 2022 said, actually, we changed our minds on this whole suing cops who violate your rights things, especially if those cops police the border. They even said, we basically think this right should never have existed in the first place. So they mostly killed it. And what all this means is now, as a result of that ruling, if a federal law enforcement officer decides to crack your collarbone or, and this is a real thing that Border Patrol did recently, shoot your dog unprovoked, there's not a lot you can do about it except to show the world what they did. You name and shame the officer, you put pressure on his bosses, and maybe that's a kind of accountability. This is perfectly legal. In fact, the law says cops have to always identify themselves, including ICE and Border Patrol. Even during a violent civil disturbance, they have to give their name, badge number, and agency. The only exception to this rule is undercover cops, and even they have to unmask when the operation is over. This is why experts say ICE is the first agency in American history to mask like this. You might be thinking, but haven't I seen SWAT teams wearing face protection or cops in gas masks? And yeah, you probably have, but here's the difference. Those cops still identify themselves. Name, badge, agency. ICE agents, as a part of masking, also conceal their names, their badge numbers, and their agency, which, remember, is illegal. Which means if an ICE agent violates your rights, breaks your ribs, locks you up without justification, grabs your grandmother off the street because he thinks she looks foreign, what can you do? You already can't press charges, you can't sue. Your last option was to name and shame. Unless now you can't because that agent is wearing a mask.
People are out there taking photos of the names, their faces, and posting them online with death threats.
This is Todd Lyons, the guy who runs ICE.
So I'm sorry if people are offended by them wearing masks, but I'm not going to let my officers and agents go out there and put their lives on the line and their family on the line because people don't like what immigration enforcement is.
This is the Trump administration's case for masks. It's to prevent people from broadcasting agents' identities. But let's dig into this. We're going to look at their evidence, and we're also going to look at why they say they're so opposed to letting ICE agents get identified. They're even pushing to make that a crime.
I would also want, elected officials to help us hold those people accountable that do dox or threaten an ICE officer.
They're saying, look, this last protection against police abuse might be the law. It just creates too great a risk for our officers. This is Tom Homan, the White House official who oversees ICE.
These men and women put a gun on their hip and wear a Kevlar vest to go on the streets every day, look for the worst of worst, makes this country safer. Them wearing a mask, if that protects them and protects their families, then that has to be done.
What is the threat to ICE so extreme that they have to do this mask thing no other law enforcement agency has ever done? It means we have to sacrifice our rights to protect them. The first answer that officials typically give is to say that it's because attacks on ICE are up by 1,000%.
The violence against our law enforcement officers has gone up 1,000%.
As of September, assaults increased over 1,000%.
Over 1,000% assaults on officers right now.
That sounds bad until you see assaults went from 11 to 121. And is that a lot? Well, compare it to, say, the NYPD, whose officers reported 1,000 assaults over the same period. Even park rangers face more assaults than ICE, even though the Park Service is much smaller. Look at it this way. 121 assaults against 20,000 ICE agents makes being an ICE safer than just about any law enforcement job. And that ICE number looks even smaller when you see how often they jump people without identifying themselves. And when you look into those 121 reported assaults, often what you find is something very different than what the agency claims. Like this DC woman who was charged with felony assault while filming ICE until security footage showed it was actually the agents who had attacked her. Or this reporter who ICE arrested in Chicago for supposedly attacking them, only to release her when it came out that they had just grabbed her for asking too many questions. ICE also tried to blame her for its agents crashing their car, but it came out she was already in cuffs when it happened. There was also this man who was killed by ICE in Chicago.
A blood-stained car marking a deadly flashpoint in America's immigration raids.
The agents claimed that he attacked them with his car, but footage showed that the agents actually shot him unprovoked while he backed up at a slow walking speed. There are loads of cases like this, including 11 in a single month just in Los Angeles. Kristi Noem, who heads the Department of Homeland Security, sometimes says ICE needs to wear masks because drug cartels have put out bounties on them.
Specific officers and agents that have bounties that have been put out on their heads. It's been $2,000 to kidnap them, $10,000 to kill them. They've released their pictures.
But she has provided no evidence of those bounties. No one has been able to find any, and it's hard to understand why cartels would do this. Johnny talked about this in his video on ICE, which you should watch. But the agency is mostly targeting non-criminals, and it's actually taking officers off of cartel cases in order to do it. So why would the cartels be mad about that? ICE also says they have to mask because protesters are threatening officers and their families. Let's take a look at the evidence. One officer in Texas who got a harassing phone call, one in Massachusetts whose wife got a threatening Facebook message, one in California whose address got posted online alongside a threat, another in California who got heckled outside his home, some flyers in Portland that said no peace for ICE and showed agents' faces, and an officer who says he got some trash dumped on his lawn. That's it. That's their evidence. And my point is not to suggest that this is all okay. Threatening anyone is a crime, and some of these people did land in jail. My point is this. 20,000 agents across America, and the worst threats they face are a handful of social media posts that led to nothing and got swiftly punished. That's the epidemic of domestic terrorism forcing ICE to mask up. Look at these videos and tell me who you think is the one in danger. Trump officials have expressed another reason why they might want ICE to mask, one that I think is more consistent with the facts. This is senior White House official Stephen Miller.
To all ICE officers, you have federal immunity in the conduct of your duty, and anybody who lays a hand on you or tries to stop you or tries to obstruct you is committing a felony.
Immunity? He's telling ICE, as long as you're on the job, every day is the purge. And this is something Trump has been promising since his 2024 campaign.
Make them safe places again. We're going to give our police their power back, and we're going to give them immunity from prosecution.
He means ICE here. Here he is announcing the agency's deployment to Washington, D.C.
They fight back until you knock the hell out of them, because it's the only language they understand. And they're standing there, and people are spitting in their face, and they're not allowed to do anything. But now they are allowed to do whatever the hell they want.
They're talking about this. If you want ICE to be able to do
whatever the hell they want,
you can't have anything limiting their powers, which means wearing masks. If you don't know an agent's identity, you can't sue them, you can't press charges, you don't even know what agency to call up and complain to. Listen to the rest of that clip of Stephen Miller promising ICE immunity.
You have immunity to perform your duties, and no one, no city official, no state official, no illegal alien, no leftist agitator or domestic insurrectionist can prevent you from fulfilling your legal obligations and duties.
He's not just talking about immunity from courts and laws. He's talking about activists and protesters, people whose only point of leverage is public accountability, name and shame, because he knows, and he is saying, that immunity for ICE means closing off all three of these lines of accountability. But why do they want that? What does ICE want to use all that immunity for, and what does it mean for the rest of us? We're now at the bigger question here. What is the purpose of Trump wanting a masked national police force? Well, we know from ICE's bosses that masking is to take away accountability. It's also worth asking whether police is the right word. Look at this video that DHS put out of ICE flying a Black Hawk military helicopter into Chicago and rappelling into an apartment building. Remember, this is how ICE wants you to see them. And if you're thinking, well, maybe this was a dangerous cartel headquarters requiring a military-style operation, it was an apartment building where ICE used flashbang grenades and zip ties on what turned out to be mostly regular families and US citizens. A DHS later admitted that despite raiding 130 apartments, they ultimately found just one person even suspected of gang affiliation. This is not exactly the Battle of Fallujah, guys. The government is constantly promoting imagery of ICE in heavy military gear, conducting military-style raids. It's in official White House statements, even White House recruitment ads. And my point is, if we want to ask what ICE is, we have to listen to what the people in charge are telling us it is. And they are shaking us by the shoulders, pleading with us to see it as a paramilitary organization. Okay, so why do they want an unaccountable paramilitary force? That's the big question here, right? Actually, time out for 1 second. This is the part where normally we'd hear from legal scholars, experts on other countries where this has happened, quotes from founding fathers about our rights. But once we start throwing around words like tyranny or scenarios about what ICE could do in the future, it's going to sound crazy or scaremongery. And honestly, I don't know how persuasive it even really is to make this about constitutional ideals or hypotheticals about becoming this or that country. So we're not going to do that. We're going to stay focused on today, ground truth, what we can say is happening. Okay, back over here. Actually, hold on 1 second. I'm going to show you what I mean. Okay, now we're going to look at how ICE is using its powers and what the top officials in charge of ICE have said they want to do with those powers. The government has gone to all of these lengths to make ICE unaccountable. That's what Stephen Miller said, right? That's his big line, federal immunity. Okay, but to do what? Obviously, the big one, to deport people. ICE's bosses say it's deporting dangerous, violent criminals, the worst of the worst, deport violent criminals. Let's look at the data. ICE doesn't tell us how many people they've deported, just how many they're currently holding, about 65,000. Of those, according to ICE's data, 1 in 4 have a conviction on their record, another 1 in 4 has been accused of something but not convicted, and half are just not here legally, for example, because their work permit expired. Actually, let's look at the convicts in a little more detail here, because only about 1 in 5 are for violent crimes. They're actually more convicted of traffic charges. And if you break down the violent crimes here, zoom in even more, most are simple assault. Homicides are a tiny sliver, less than 0.3% of ICE detentions. So ICE is mostly not deporting violent criminals. Who they're mostly deporting is undocumented immigrants. And that's what the agency exists to do, but I think it's worth being clear about that. So we're gonna cross out violent criminals here, and I'm gonna write down undocumented immigrants. Deport undocumented immigrants. Now we're gonna put it on the board as we go. Deport undocumented immigrants. Okay, good. These are people who have mostly, for the most part, overwhelmingly never gotten as much as a traffic charge. Just worth to keep that in mind. But if this was the only thing ICE were doing, it would make masking seem really weird. Like, ICE doesn't need immunity or anonymity to deport non-violent undocumented immigrants, right? And sure enough, they are quietly deporting a lot of legal immigrants too. In San Diego, ICE has even been showing up at green card interviews for people married to US citizens only to handcuff and take them away. Like this couple, a US Marine who watched ICE drag off his Thailand-born wife.
Do everything that we can to protect and serve our country, and then they betray us by treating us like we've never done anything.
Or these 4 legal residents in California who got pushed into an unmarked car and never came back. Or this research scientist from Korea, perfectly legal, who no one has heard from since ICE grabbed him in July. No one knows how many legal residents have been swept up, but one review of official records found that in June and July alone, ICE grabbed 9,000 people who had no criminal record or deportation order. It's tempting to hope that these are just innocent mistakes until you see videos like this. A mom in Virginia showing agents her valid work permit and social security card, only to get dragged off while her daughter records. Or this woman, another mom, another legal resident, who handed over her papers to an ICE officer who then, on camera, pretended to not have them, I guess as a joke.
She just gave you the documents. What documents?
Then had her handcuffed and driven off in an unmarked car. And this might just be the start. President Trump says he wants to do this on a much larger scale. Like in this Truth Social post pledging to denaturalize migrants and deport foreign nationals. And not just individuals, but entire populations that he deemed non-compatible or disruptive. A threat that he made on Thanksgiving. So you see why ICE might think it's their job to deport people for their race or religion no matter how legal they are. And they're taking away US citizens too. So far, at least 170, according to reporting by ProPublica, including 20 children that we know about. Some citizens are being deported, including this 4-year-old boy with cancer, often to countries they've never been to, with no legal authority to ship them off. Here's a big one: illegal use of force. Like when this woman asked an agent why he had just arrested her legal resident husband while he was at the courthouse just updating his paperwork. Or this 79-year-old man, a citizen who did nothing wrong, ICE agents broke his ribs, knelt on his neck, then held him for 12 hours without medical attention. Or this high school student, also a US citizen, who had to be hospitalized after agents knelt on his neck. We have dozens of these. ProPublica found 50 just of ICE agents smashing car windows. People guilty of no crime, not resisting, not trying to drive away. Remember, this is exactly the sort of violence that police accountability is supposed to protect you from. There have also been widespread reports of illegal searches, often of people's homes, which ICE will storm out of nowhere, no warrant, and trash.
Hands up! Hands up! Hands up! Hands up!
A federal judge called one of these the most illegal search I have ever seen in my life. A high school student would know this was an illegal search. And these aren't mistakes. The Trump administration is telling ICE to do this. There's a whole constitutional amendment outlawing this one. Number 4, no illegal search and seizure. But if ICE can violate it with impunity, it's not really a right anymore, is it? And if you're thinking, well, I'm not an immigrant, so I don't have to worry, just wait. Before we show these, I want you to ask yourself, have I ever disagreed with anything the government was doing? Even if it's not ICE, one day you might want to protest something, and then this could be you. Some of these are just bullying, but look, free speech is supposed to mean you don't have to worry you'll get clocked in the jaw by a masked state agent just for questioning the government. And these incidents are getting more serious. You might remember this one from earlier. It's of ICE snatching people at a peaceful protest and stuffing them into a van. Here's a woman who was playing a clarinet on the sidelines of a protest when ICE tackled her, dragged her off, charged her with felony assault of an officer. More and more of these protesters are getting picked up and then resurfacing later in hospital beds. Like this Los Angeles activist who got dragged off by ICE, beaten into unconsciousness, and then ICE came to her hospital bed to take her away again.
At one point, she identifies herself as an American.
Let me go, I'm an American.
Here's ICE shooting a canister at a priest in the head. He's just standing there. Look at this video from Illinois, where ICE drove a car into a crowd of protesters. The government indicted the protesters for this, calling it a criminal conspiracy to assault an ICE officer. I'm not leaving anything out of this video. They're facing up to 8 years in federal prison for this. And ICE is starting to threaten worse than prison, like these agents who drove up to a protester, pointed a gun in his face, and told him, "Bang, bang, you're dead, liberal." And here's the really important thing. These are not a few bad apple agents going rogue. Here's Kristi Noem, who, remember, runs the agency in charge of ICE, telling agents they have carte blanche to hammer protesters for their political speech.
We're going to hammer these guys that are advocating for violence against the American people. What they are doing is advocating to harm not just you and your colleagues, but your families, and they're doxing your identities.
There it is again. Doxing. The last protection regular people have against police, simply knowing agents' identities, our legal right, has been turned into a crime deserving of a beating by ICE agents. And if you're skeptical that ICE's bosses really want to encourage violence, take a good look at this ICE guy here. That's Greg Bavino. He is the top operational official at ICE, not some rogue officer. The Trump administration has made Bavino the public face of ICE, promoting him in social videos like, well, just watch. Okay, hold on. This coat. They put out a lot of photos of Bavino in this outfit, and like, is it a dog whistle? Are they trolling us? I mean, come on. Nope. Not taking the bait, but we will come back to Greg Bavino, but not the jacket. Here's another thing ICE has been doing a lot of. assault or jail people filming them. Like this guy in LA, he had his car rammed by ICE agents, was hospitalized, and got dragged out of his hospital bed by ICE to be arrested. Some ICE agents in Charlotte actually got caught on camera plotting to do the same thing to a guy filming them, and then to shoot him.
He's gonna crash. He's gonna get shot. That's what's gonna happen.
Or this guy, just filming ICE at a red light in Chicago.
What you gonna do? I'm a U.S. citizen. I'm a U.S. citizen. What you gonna do? I'm a U.S. citizen.
Here's one infamous case. You might have heard about this. Miramar Martinez is a Chicago activist who films ICE operations. It's because of people like her that we know what ICE is doing. In October, Border Patrol agents surrounded her car and shot her 5 times. The agency said Martinez had rammed their car with hers and brandished a gun.
But new information and inconsistencies are making people question the government's version of what happened.
Police reports and body cam footage showed that she never picked up a gun, that it was Border Patrol who had actually rammed her car off the road, and that the agents, just before shooting her, had shouted, "Do something." And there's more to this. The agency's statement on the shooting made a point of saying that Martinez was known for doxing agents, and that just days before this shooting, agents had been told to be on the lookout for her, as if to say to the rest of us, look at what happens to people who dox us. And by the way, it later came out that the agent who had shot her sent texts bragging about it to other agents. I fired 5 rounds and she had 7 holes. Put that in your book, boys. The charges against her got dropped for lack of evidence, but, you know, I still got the message out that its agents might ram and shoot you and get away with it just for doing this.
I felt it was my responsibility to let my neighborhood know that ICE agents were near.
ICE has even begun targeting elected officials who criticize the agency.
Breaking news here in Manhattan. City's controller, Brad Lander, was just detained at immigration.
Alderwoman handcuffed by federal agents.
Arrested last month.
That dramatic showdown in Los Angeles. A senator handcuffed.
If you think it's an accident, look at this. When ICE deployed to Los Angeles, Kristi Noem flew to say that they had come to, quote, liberate Los Angeles and California from its elected leadership.
We are staying here to liberate this city from the socialist and the burdensome leadership that this governor and that this mayor have placed on this country.
Moments after that, federal agents with Noem handcuffed a United States senator who'd come to ask her questions.
That you're rotating on your
Think about the message this sends about ICE's mission. It's about more than just immigration, isn't it? ICE has also begun defying legally binding court orders, like from this federal judge who told ICE its agents had to identify themselves. These courts are supposed to be the last guardrail against agencies like ICE breaking the law. When one threatened to hold government officials in contempt for ignoring their rulings, Tom Homan, this guy, said something important in response.
We're not stopping. I don't care what the judges think. I don't care what the left thinks. We're coming.
It's policy, he is saying, to ignore the law. And what are they doing with all this power? They've swept up thousands of people with no charge, no formal record, without saying who they've taken or even where they are.
Investigative team says at least 3,000 jailed immigrants have vanished from federal records.
In Texas, ICE agents raided a children's birthday party, driving off with 38 adults and 9 children. Nearly a year later, we still don't know what happened to them. So what am I supposed to put on this card? What do you even call this? A local judge who's been demanding answers in the case told ProPublica, quote, "We're not told why they took them, and we're not told where they took them. By definition, that's a kidnapping." That's from a judge. I don't want to sound alarmist, so instead of writing kidnapping, I'll just put, I guess, disappear people without saying why or where to. Again, if you're thinking, I'm not an immigrant, so this doesn't affect me, ICE is starting to target citizens just for their political opinions. Greg Bavino. Remember him? Bavino said in court that he told his agents to arrest protesters just for making, quote, hyperbolic statements. ICE's field director said they consider it legal to arrest Chicago residents just for being opposed to the agency's operations there. Just to be super clear about this, ICE is telling its officers to arrest you for expressing political opinions that they don't like. I really want to make that clear. And they're saying this extends to what opinions you express online, too. Again, this is according to one of ICE's own officials who testified in court that the agency acquired a list of 5,000 college students and others who had protested against Israel. Israel? What does that even have to do with this? Sure enough, a bunch of legal residents on that list got swept up by ICE, including one woman who spent 6 weeks in a detention center just for writing a student op-ed about Israel, and another still locked up months later with no charge at all. A federal judge ruled that all of this is illegal, but ICE is ignoring him. In fact, ICE's bosses say that the agency will do even more of this, next by targeting people who criticize ICE too vocally online, including by tracking people's physical movements, using their phone signal and facial recognition software attached to drones that ICE is flying over US cities. This is in their own documents, and the software that they use for that facial recognition is so powerful that even a lot of police departments are barred from using it. They have also revealed a plan to force US citizens with so much as an immigrant family member to submit to around-the-clock government monitoring through their fingerprints, eye scans, and their DNA, all as part of a mandatory government registry to track immigrants and their relatives for, quote, good moral character. Actually, that last thing about monitoring citizens for moral character, that seems notable enough to put it on the board, so let's put that one up there too. Let's take a step back and look at this. We asked why ICE masks. And the short answer, according to the people in charge, is to make it immune. And the long answer is that so that their immunity will permit them to do all of this. And that brings us to ICE killing a woman named Renee Good in Minneapolis, an event that was, in many ways, the culmination of everything ICE has been building over the past year. And we're going to break down precisely what happened, beat by beat, so you can see what it looks like when ICE deploys the same powers that its bosses have steadily built up for it, and against the people that those same bosses have urged ICE to target. As you're watching, I want you to think of this moment as the entire relationship between ICE and America in microcosm, because that's what it is. This video is from a Minneapolis suburb in early January. These ICE agents are stopping Renee Good, just a mom, US citizen, on her way home after dropping her kids at school. It's easy to understand what happens next if we see it from another angle. This is the same moment you just saw, now from video taken by an ICE agent. Renee answers the agent's commands.
That's fine, dude. I'm not mad at you.
Let's go back to the other angle. That ICE agent is about to try to open her door. Okay, back to the second angle. There's the agent about to go for her door in the back. And witnesses said at this point they heard one agent tell Renee to get out of the car, while another agent told her to drive away.
Out of the car. Get out of the car.
Okay, back to the wide view. Renee at this point has gotten two contradictory orders. Agents are surrounding her car, so she puts her car in reverse to follow the second order, the one telling her to drive away. You can see the ICE agent recording this on his phone. And notice something here. His phone is in his left hand. Let's rewind a few seconds. His phone at this point was still in his right hand, his dominant hand. And it stayed there while he walked around the car. Let's see if we can find the moment he switches the phone from his right hand to his left. Start here, same moment we just saw, now from the agent's perspective. He's walking around the side of the car.
When you come talk to us later. That's fine. U.S. citizen.
Okay, here. You see the agent's hand at the bottom of the frame and the camera jumping around. This is the agent moving the phone from his right hand into his left. Renee has been parked this entire time. She's told the agent she's complying. The agent taking video is to the side of the car in no threat of being run over. And yet, he just did something weird. He freed up his right hand, his gun hand, and he's about to do something else provocative. He crosses in front of the car. He's going out of his way to block this woman in. Even though she's done nothing to threaten him, he's now got his hand on his gun. This is something that ICE and Border Patrol explicitly tell its agents not to do. This is an internal Border Patrol document from 2013. It says agents have a history of intentionally putting themselves in the exit path of vehicles to create justification to use deadly force against the driver, to shoot the driver, often just because the agent was feeling frustrated. And it set rules, which are still in force, forbidding agents from shooting at a moving vehicle or standing in front of a suspect's car. But that is exactly what this agent was getting ready to do. Remember, Renee gets contradictory orders from ICE telling her to both get out of the car and drive away.
Out of the car. Get out of the car.
Her friend tells her to drive away.
Get out of the car.
She backs up a few feet. It's clear from this angle. The ICE agent is now to the side of the car, out of danger. But the agent draws his gun and steps to the left as Renee turns the wheels to the right, away from the agents, and starts to drive. The agent fires 3 times. One goes through the windshield, and the other 2 through the driver's side window. They hit Renee in the face, chest, and arm, killing her. You've probably seen that video before, and maybe you'd even seen it broken down. But to me, what makes this especially significant is how ICE's bosses presented the incident, because of what it tells us about why they want ICE to have the power, thanks to masking, to conduct their operations like this. And at first, those officials said the shooting was justified because Renee hit the agent with her car.
This was an act of domestic terrorism.
But we know that's not true. That actually the agent readied his gun hand when Renee was parked and complying with orders, then put himself in front of her car to block her in. And when she tried to safely drive off, he shot her to death. So Trump officials pivoted and said she was a domestic terrorist not for assaulting agents, but on these grounds.
You know, if you look up the definition of terrorism, is there violence? Is there a threat of violence based on an ideology that wants to change the way the government does what we do? If you look up the definition of terrorism, it certainly can fall within that.
In other words, she was a terrorist because she might have disagreed with Trump's politics. And when Trump was asked whether ICE was right to use deadly force, he said yes, for this reason.
The woman and her friend were highly disrespectful of law enforcement. You saw that?
State officials tried to investigate her death as a possible murder, but the FBI blocked it, and instead investigated Renee for ties to supposed activist agitators. And Vice President J.D. Vance said the agent who'd killed her had total immunity.
That guy's protected by absolute immunity. He was doing his job.
He was doing his job. In the days after, some ICE agents took that message seriously. They told protesters, keep it up and you're next.
Have y'all not learned from the past couple of days?
What do you want us to learn?
Following federal agents.
Give me my phone back.
Or this, outside of a church, right after Renee's killing.
Not learned from what just happened? Go home.
Learn what?
A far-right influencer embedded with ICE said the same thing.
Hey, we executed one of you yesterday.
And then Trump followed this by sending 1,000 more agents to the same city, who arrived knowing their government had told the country it was okay for them to shoot neighborhood moms to death for being rude or for having the wrong political views, and they would get full immunity to do it again. What does all of this add up to? Big picture, what is this new set of powers that at root come from masks intended to accomplish? Because ICE is about to get much, much larger. As of this month, its budget is nearly quadrupling to $28 billion a year, which is more than most of the world's standing armies. In polls, most Americans say that ICE is too aggressive, that it's probably arresting citizens, and that agents shouldn't wear masks. But listen to what President Trump said when he was shown videos of ICE tackling mothers and tear gassing suburban streets.
Have some of these raids gone too far?
No, I think they haven't gone far enough because we've been held back by the judges, by the liberal judges that were put in by Biden and by Obama.
Even all this is just from ICE operations in a few cities. With its new budget, the agency is about to become reality nationally. So, the usual move, again, would be for me to bring in someone from another country where something like this has happened to explain how life changes when the government has an unaccountable paramilitary force that targets people for their opinions, handcuffs elected officials, disappears thousands without charge, and attacks innocent citizens and protesters with impunity. But let's keep the focus here and now by hearing from a guy named William Young. Young is a high-ranking federal judge appointed by Ronald Reagan. It's not some liberal. A few months ago, several rights groups sued the government over ICE locking up legal residents for criticizing Israel. Again, I don't know why that's ICE's problem. Young heard the case and issued a ruling saying the practice was illegal and had to stop. But he said more than that. And then there's the issue of masks. This court has listened carefully to the reasons given for masking up and has heard the same reasons advanced by the acting director of ICE. It rejects this testimony. ICE goes masked for a single reason: to terrorize Americans into quiescence. He goes on, in all our history, we have never tolerated an armed, masked secret police. That's his opinion. He's one guy as a judge. Agree with him, disagree with him. That's what he said. Some of the states where ICE is deploying are advancing laws to require ICE agents to identify themselves. Here's California Governor Gavin Newsom.
You're going to go out and you're going to do enforcement. Provide an ID. Tell us which agency you represent. Provide us basic information that all local law enforcement is required to provide.
The Trump administration says that they will ignore these laws and might even arrest state officials who pass them. I want to come back to this, the balance of rights and protections between law enforcement and citizens. It's not looking so good for the citizens, but that last protection, public accountability, name and shame, it still has some life in it. Despite all of ICE's efforts, you can still name and shame them. Greg Bavino, I told you we would come back to him. Bavino is one of the few ICE officers who, as the public face of the agency's operations, makes himself identifiable. It's how we know that when that US senator got handcuffed for questioning the DHS chief, he was there. That when masked ICE agents masked outside a press conference put on by the California governor, he was there. And that at ICE's deployment in Chicago, he was on the ground directing operations. Which means that when a federal judge in Chicago ordered ICE to stop tear gassing people without justification, she had someone she could hold accountable by name, Greg Bavino. Barely a week later, guess who showed up in a video in Chicago, personally throwing a tear gas container into a peaceful crowd? Greg Bavino. Which meant that judge could order Bavino to appear in court and even threaten to charge him with contempt, or with perjury for when Bavino testified that he'd hit a protester in self-defense, only for footage to reveal that it had been the reverse. Name and shame, public pressure. Look, I am not saying that threatening one ICE official with some moderate scolding from a judge is going to turn all of this back. It's not going to stop a 20,000 strong paramilitary force that's been promised total immunity from the highest level of power. Public accountability, it's just a tap on the brakes, but it works. The masking shows they know that it works. Every time they attack someone who films them, it's an admission that regular people do still have some power over them. They're afraid of these videos. They're afraid of you seeing what they're doing. Which is why, whatever you think of immigration, whoever you voted for, if you value your rights and freedoms, if you don't want the government to be able to send some masked goon to shove you into a van because the powers that be don't like your politics, then one thing that you can do, as simple as it sounds, is to keep watching.